We spend a lot of time talking about what people should eat when they develop prediabetes, but we don't talk about the fact that we've engineered a lot of ordinary activities out of our lives. Movement is one of them. And that may be one of the most important changes that affect our metabolic health. And it could be the underlying cause of a lot of what we deal with our new metabolic problems. So, what I want to talk about is why simple activity like walking can make the biggest difference in your metabolic health. I'm going to talk about why it matters for insulin resistance, where the 10,000 step idea actually came from, and how much walking you really need to be healthy. So I'm Dr. Jen. I help women and families reverse prediabetes and insulin resistance with what I like to call joyful medicine. It's where evidence-based lifestyle medicine is joy first, life affirming, culturally honoring, and meant to be lived with along with the life that you're living. So the answer is really not that everybody needs to start chasing 10,000 steps. I know tracking devices are everywhere. And I would argue that we probably need to do a little bit less tracking and more living, let go of some of the technology and really just embrace what being a human is all about. And that's what I want to talk to you about, because walking really is one of the most human things that we can do. And unfortunately, in modern American life, we have truly engineered movement, regular movement out of our lives. We, First, I want to talk to you about where does this 10,000 steps come from? So it's interesting though, because while wasn't necessarily a scientific opinion, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this lately, that 10,000 steps came out of nowhere. There's no evidence to support it. And while that is true and may be true, I had to do a little more research because I do think this concept of the fact that humans don't move enough is a real thing. And, we've seen this, right? We know that sitting is the new smoking. If you talk to most wellness or lifestyle medicine physicians, we talk about this a lot. But okay, so 10,000 steps, where did it come from? There was actually a Japanese pedometer maker that came around in 1964, and they came up with the idea of a 10,000 step meter. And so while there's not a biological divide, it's quite interesting though, because 10,000 steps actually correlates to about 4 to 5 miles per day. And if you go back in history and you look at some of the traditional hunter-gatherers and also the current hunter-gatherers, they walked 4 to 5 miles a day, or 5 to 7 miles a day, actually, as part of their daily routine, right? Because they were walking to hunt, they were walking to get water, maybe they were walking to, meet with other community members. So this was part of their regular day. And when you look at human muscles and human metabolism and human bodies, we are meant to move. We're meant to walk. We're meant to bend and squat and stretch and pull and push and all of these things. And modern technology is amazing. It gives us so much, but it also takes away a lot of that natural movement. And so while 10,000 steps is not based in a true science, it is based in, our ancestors probably did that. And so it actually that 10,000 step number might actually be closer to what we should be aiming for. Now, I'm not going to say that anybody should aim exactly for a number, but I will say that walking is one of the most powerful things you can do for glucose metabolism. So we know that our muscle is the biggest user of glucose in our body. And by just simply moving, glucose moves into our muscle naturally. But you know what else it does? It actually improves insulin sensitivity. And so and it compounds over time. So as you do it, if you just start with 10 minutes after meals, if you do this every single day, it compounds. So the effect, it improves as you do it. So that's really powerful, simple thing that you can do. And so walking after eating is a simple way to improve glucose metabolism. Regular physical activity in general is great, but I feel like sometimes it gets a little conflated because we talk about going to the gym all the time, and going to the gym is great if you love it. If you don't love going to the gym, you don't have to go to the gym. Just moving somehow is important. One of the important things about it, though, is that a lot of us go to the gym in the morning and then we sit the rest of the day. And I will say that it is just as bad, to go to the gym and sit all day as it is to probably just sit all day, which is I'm not saying to discourage you from going to the gym, because yes, there are other benefits, but it's to say that sitting has a real detrimental effect. When our muscles are inactive all day, many things happen, right? So one thing is that it affects our glucose metabolism. It affects our mood, it affects our digestion, it affects so many things. So when you think about that, just that act of moving, of pumping our muscles, we're actually enacting this huge metabolic sink, this metabolic action. So movement is really metabolic action, metabolic health. And so I want to say that when we add this walk after meals, it can be one of the most powerful things we can do. So yes, working out is important too because our muscle strength, our muscle is metabolic tissue. So when we have more muscle, we metabolize more. So we burn more, our basal metabolic rate increases. So that is an important thing, especially as we go to midlife and we lose some of our muscle mass and our metabolic rate lowers. This is one of the other problems that is affects our insulin resistance and the development of more difficulty with our metabolism as we go through perimenopause and menopause. So the key here is that long periods of sitting should be avoided at all costs. I like to look at it like maybe even setting an alarm on your phone to kind of remind you to get up and move around. It's good for your brain too. It's good for your mood. I like to combine it with spending some time outside. It's good that nature also has other benefits. But really, the key is putting more of that movement back into your day instead of sitting most of the day. And this is, I can't stress how important it is. So we're always trying to hack everything. And I think that this is one of the best hacks that if we can break some of these patterns of sitting, we sit at work. A lot of times we sit in our car. We sit at home. We sometimes we're not even cooking our food. We're having it delivered. A lot of the things that we used to do that involved activity, like gardening to make our food, or even, baking bread, all of these things that were natural ways to move have been engineered out of modern life. And modern life and ingenuity and technology is amazing. But again, it takes some of that. We have to actively think about engineering that movement back into our lives because it's not present. It doesn't happen spontaneously. I always refer back to the blue zones because those are the areas around the world where people live the longest. And the thing is, their lives are simple. When you look at their lives, they eat simple foods. They focus on living to enjoy life as opposed to working, living to work, right? We tend to build our life around our work life, and they tend to build their life around living. And these are important things, and all of these have an effect on our health. We often try to separate our life from our health, but it's intimately connected, obviously. And this movement is one of the ways that we have kind of modern life has taken over and taken away that natural movement. So if we can look to those areas around the world that have these environments that are built up for success, built up for health, longevity, naturally occurs because they have these patterns that are just part of their natural life. So when I talk to my patients and my women in my program, my diabetes reversal program, we talk about how can we look at our day and how can we engineer some of that movement back in. So some of it is, if you're working, a lot of us work from home now. So where can we maybe take a meeting while we're walking around? Maybe we can break our day up with going for a walk outside. I always encourage people to do that if you can walk around lunchtime. Maybe you can get a standing desk or a walking desk if you're working from home. That's something to think about. But just start to think about some of those patterns. Maybe instead of driving to work, you take your bike to work or walk to work if it's possible. Maybe just taking the stairs instead of taking the elevator. So just starting to thinking about movement a little bit differently. We're always trying to get the perfect workout in and, making sure we're getting our strength training in, which is important. But even more important is making our lives more movement focused, making movement just natural part of how we're meant to be. And so that is what I would encourage you to think about, you know, all of the ways that you can add some of that back into your life, because modern life really does make it a hurdle in so many ways. And I'll talk about more of those ways as time goes on, but the movement is a huge one. We cannot talk about our metabolic health without addressing this huge component. So especially for women in midlife. As I mentioned, the loss of muscle mass is one thing. Um, but the other big thing is actually estrogen has a direct effect on our glucose metabolism, and it also has a direct effect on our insulin sensitivity. So not only is it affecting our muscle mass, it's affecting our stress and our sleep, but it's also affecting, how we use insulin and glucose. So this movement becomes even more important. And I would say that even, as we're in midlife, sometimes we've gotten into this pattern of not moving. And it's because we have busy lives, because we're taking care of, the rest of our families and our children, and maybe with busy careers and our schedules are intense. But for many reasons, movement needs to become, part of the picture again. As I mentioned, we talk about the metabolic benefits, but I cannot stress enough the stress benefits. Movement helps neutralize some of the stress that is amplified during this period of time, which also affects our glucose metabolism. It improves our mood. It can improve our sleep. So really, moving throughout the day is one of the most simple things that we can really start to focus more on. So what about this 10,000 steps? Does everybody need 10,000 steps? I would say no. I started with saying that I think we have too much technology. And so I always like to veer away from the numbers and really just try to look at more the human side of it, because I feel like we're always trying to optimize a number, and it adds another level of stress to our lives, another goal we have to hit, another, hurdle we have to meet, or another restrictive rule that we have to meet. And instead of looking at it that way, just start to look at how we can make it more natural. So no, 10,000 steps are not essential, but moving throughout the day is essential. So benefits occur at I think it's about 5,000 steps a day. But again, maybe you're not stepping. Maybe you're doing a seated workout. The key, again, is that movement. The more movement, the more benefit. And the current American Diabetes Standard does talk about movement, the 5,000 steps, and the importance of moving away from sedentary time, because again, our muscles are metabolic machinery in our body. So what should we do? So I think the best thing is to see, where are you starting? Look at your day, and how does your day uh, run? Are you working out in the morning and not moving the rest of the day? Are you not moving at all? So maybe just starting with a 10-minute walk after meals. That's a great place to start. It can be one of the most powerful things you do, and that effect compounds over time. Maybe you can, maybe you talk on the phone in the evenings. Maybe you can walk during a phone call, or maybe you can walk during a meeting. If you tie it to something that you do automatically. I always like to get up first thing in the morning and go for a walk. I also like to take a break during the middle of the day and go for a walk. If my dog seems a little antsy, sometimes I take him for an extra walk. So think about ways where you can tie it to something else you're doing, and where it can become more regular. Maybe you can intentionally park farther away, or intentionally commute differently, one day a week. And any of these things can be beneficial. So the key is just think about one place you can start to add more, or take away some convenience and add more friction as far as movement into your day. The other thing is really thinking about those times when you're sitting for long periods of time. So how can you break that up? Maybe it's like you take a 10-minute break every hour. Maybe you do some jumping jacks. Maybe you do some squats. Maybe you just get up and go walk outside. Something that breaks up long periods of sitting. And so I think a great place to start is to challenge yourself, for the next week. Do that assessment, see where you can add more during the day. Maybe you can add a 10-minute walk after every meal, after every dinner. And that's a great, simple place to start. Doesn't have to be about 10,000 steps, but just take a simple 10-minute walk after dinner. And so I always like to talk about metabolic health overall, about creating environments and foundations for healing. I know so much of the talk about prediabetes and diabetes is focused on rules, right? What you shouldn't have, what you should be eating, how much protein you should consume, how many calories you should have, how many minutes you should work out. But I really like to try to make it more human and more a lived experience. And I think that is really the key to making it sustainable and consistent. So it's not about perfection. It's really about consistency more than anything. So even if the step is a 5-minute walk, maybe it's a 10-minute walk, maybe it's just you make a goal to stand during every meeting. Whatever it is, doing it consistently is the key, and not perfectly. I'm not even talking, it doesn't have to be perfect either. So consistency, we often think that if we miss a day, then all is lost. But I want you to understand that consistency just means that you show up again. You recognize that today maybe you didn't do it, but it doesn't mean that tomorrow you can't. And the benefit will compound over time. It doesn't have to be, again, every single day. If you walk on Monday and you don't walk again until Thursday, you're still getting the benefit. So I just want to remind you that consistency is really the key. So I have a masterclass on reversing prediabetes in midlife, and it is gives you simple shifts like this, adding movement into your day, and the foundational tools I teach all of the women in my program and my patients to help improve their metabolic health. So if you'd like that, the link will be in the comments below. And make sure you like and subscribe and follow for more uh, education on metabolic health. Thanks for watching.